C.S. Lewis one time said that most people think real brilliance is being able to see simple things and understand how complicated they really are, and then put into words how complicated they really are. But in his opinion, real brilliance is taking complicated things and making them simple. I think he's right. A lot of people, and I put myself in this category, feel like sometimes the Christian life is a complicated thing. I mean, well, for the Jew, they weren't Christians, but to be a good Jew was a very complicated thing. I mean, you had to manage 360 some commandments, and managing that amounts to aligning yourself around those 360 commands. And when you broke one of the commands, there was a fairly complex set of procedures you had to go through to reconnect with God through a priest at a particular location. It was a very complex system. I think I tend to take, and you've already figured this out, I tend to take the words of Scripture, and sometimes I make them more complicated than they really need to be, instead of making them simple enough for me and others to be able to get our hands around them and do something concrete with them. It was a good reminder when I reflected on what John has written here in 2 John, where we talked about it last time when he said, I'm not giving you a new command. This is in, where is this? Verse 5? But one we have had from the beginning. I ask that we love one another. And there it is. The complex made simple. I first encountered this idea from Andy Stanley, where he said, from Mount Sinai on, for the Jew, life got more and more complex as the law went from 10 words to these 360 some commands. Jesus then came on the scene, and you'll remember the story of the Jewish teacher that came to Jesus and said, "What's the greatest command?" A legitimate question. And you can read into this whatever you want to. That what was the Jewish leader trying to trip Jesus up with a question that he knew didn't have a good answer, or was he in sincerity a truth seeker? I think the second is true, because Jesus answered his question without, from what the text indicates, without hesitation. The greatest command is love the Lord your God with all your heart and your soul and your mind and your strength. And this was in Deuteronomy chapter 6. This was what the Jews had. They had captured this idea and carried it through, that this is the central idea. This is the point. Love God with all of who you are. And then Jesus said, which, by the way, I got to remind you that this had been the practice of Jews. Reciting this had been the practice of Jews for centuries by the time Jesus and this Jewish leader spoke. And then Jesus goes on and says, and the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. And then he said, all the law and the prophets hang on these two. Okay. So there you go. Down from 360 some to 2. And then Jesus with the disciples. We talked about it last time. What's recorded in John's Gospel in chapter 13. I give you a new commandment, Jesus said, that you love one another as I have loved you. 360 some, down to 2, down to 1. The point, the objective is love. Love God and love people. Love one another. And then, as I said last time, we have our perfect model for this. Our motivation is to love Him. That's why we model Him. And okay, now John says this is not a new command, and by the time he wrote this letter, it wasn't new. 50, 60, 70 years old. And he said, it's from the beginning. I ask that you love one another. This was his plea. How much of the difficulty in life, in your family, would be somehow addressed? I don't know that it'd all be solved, but at the very least, it would become, in my opinion and my experience, more manageable if we really loved one another. One of the things that gets in the way of this for me is, I love me. Is this evil? I don't think so. I think it can be bent. Remember, Jesus said the second of the greatest commands is to love your neighbor as yourself. A lot has been made of this. And again, I'll say it can be bent, but it still stands that God's design is that we love people, we love others, we love our neighbor as we love ourselves. If we don't love ourselves, it's somewhere between difficult and impossible to love other people. What does it look like to love yourself? Well, in this broken sense that I've referred to, this bent sense, it would have to do with me putting my desires ahead of others, my needs ahead of others. In this bent, broken sense, it means my focus is on me. This quickly moves from the category of self-love to preoccupation with self, which is really at the heart of pride, and pride always leads to some kind of destructive, non-God-honoring behavior. Self-care is what I think that this idea of love yourself has to do with, I think is best understood as self-care. Meaning, remember the last time you flew on an airplane? Which for a lot of us was more than a year ago. But when you did, they're required by law to give a safety demonstration and instruction, right? And part of that is, no matter where you fly, they tell you if you have to have a water emergency there is a life jacket, usually under your seat. And they say which by the way, when you're flying inland, you got nothing but livestock ponds and lakes. The odds of crashing in water are not very big. But anyway, then they say in case of loss of cabin pressure, an oxygen mask will fall from above. And then who do they say to put the oxygen mask on first? If you're traveling with a companion, you put it on yourself first, and then on your companion, then on your child. Why is that? Well, that's easy. Because if you become oxygen deprived, which happens rather quickly, you're not going to be able to take care of this traveling companion. So get yourself taken care of so that you can take care of others. That's the crux of self-care. Why do I need to take care of myself? Because if I am not taken care of, I'm not able to take care of others. There's this tension between I'm taking care of myself and I am obsessed with taking care of myself. I don't want to be obsessed, but I don't want to neglect what actually needs to happen in order for me to be capable of caring for others. Oh gosh, I could go a long time. I mean, books, 300 and some page books have been written about dealing with and frankly, most of those books are not from a Christian perspective. They're just talking about mental health, and there's value in some of them. But this idea of self-care, taking care of yourself, is a big theme, and the waters are deep. I feel it's worth taking a little. This is a full-on bunny trail for the whole time on this installment, but it's worth it in my opinion, and because to love one another, you've got to have enough of you intact. You have to have given yourself enough self-care that you're capable of loving others. I want to just suggest that there are a few things that everybody needs in order to care well for themselves. And let's start with from the outside and go in. Let's start with something that doesn't seem very spiritual. Our diet and exercise habits and routines are important here. If your body and your brain are fueled, and they're fueled by whatever you put into them, okay? Your diet matters. As much as I truly sometimes wish that Krispy Kreme donuts and that, man, we got a little donut shop up here that makes one amazing apple fritter. I mean, it's big, and oh my gosh, it's so good. And but you know what? Here's the deal. Those are almost empty calories. They almost do nothing to fuel the health of my body and my brain. In fact, because I'm a type 2 diabetic, those things are destructive of that idea. Second thing, so I have to be careful, all right? And sometimes I have to deprive myself. But that's kind of, you got to be an adult at some point, right? Okay. Here's the second thing. Your exercise matters because your body will not produce some essential hormones until it is put under the appropriate physical stress. That's why exercise is valid and valuable. I'm going to go over time a little bit here because we can finish this. So you've got these, what I would consider somatic. They have to do with your body things, your diet, exercise. Then I want to move in another cycle to what's going into your mind through your senses. What are you reading? What are you watching? In our world, we watch more than we read. It just is a fact. You may not be in that category, but you probably are. If you're not in that category, more power to you. Way to go. But monitor. I'm not going to there's no magic number for this is all you need. Everything after that is destructive. But everybody needs to look into their own experience and formulate how much is enough. Because once you reach enough, anything beyond that is not good for you. How much TV are you watching? How much screen time are you spending? And here I am, I'm on a screen. So, you have to hold it in balance. The second thing is, what am I reading and how much am I reading? I believe reading is a real key to keeping your mind healthy. And I don't believe that the only thing you need to read is the Bible. Back up just a minute and go back to this idea of what are you reading and how much are you reading. If you read a lot, but you're just reading, mental, intellectual Krispy Kreme, that ain't going to do it. You need to read things that stretch your mind, that make you ponder and think. Everybody's different on how that works for them, but you challenge yourself. Okay, what are you putting into your mind? You need to. I can be this emphatic. You must put God's word into your mind daily. Are you going to go to hell if you don't? That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying you can't understand God's design and arrange your life around it if you're not looking into, reading, studying, thinking deeply about God's things. Your body, your mind, your heart. Examine your affections. We rarely do this because we rarely have to. But examine your affections. What are the things that matter most to you? What are the things that capture and hold your attention? What are the things that you tend to get pretty stuck on and focused in on? These are things of your heart. Monitor, contemplate. So what should be the most significant is my love for God. Okay. Talked about the body and the mind and the heart and the soul. And then last of all, I want to say, look at your relationships. Are you living a healthy life within your relationships? Are there appropriate boundaries? Are you receiving and giving? Or is it a one-way street? Oh gosh, again, books have been written about this, but here's the deal. If you want to love one another, it requires self-care. Maybe this week, maybe today would be a good time to examine your self-care and the balance of what is right and helpful and reasonable. Well, this is the longest Selfcare with Stevie Boy I have ever produced. That's why there was this line. Spoiler alert, I've gone way over time when you open this thing up, but I'll do better next time. I promise. I'll see you then on Selfcare with Stevie Boy.